Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Indie Side. My name is Peter McCollum, and I'm here with Joshua Smalley. And we were just warming up about the topics we were going to talk about. But Josh, can you introduce yourself first?
Sure. First of all, pleasure to meet you, Peter, and thank you for hosting me on the podcast. I really appreciate it, both you and LEJ being so warm and open to me and communicating really well leading up to the podcast here. So my name is Joshua Smalley. I am primarily an educator, international educator. I've been teaching for 18 years. I taught in America for 4 years. And then I taught in Kazakhstan for 3 years, Belarus for 3 years, and now I've been in Ethiopia 8 years. On this side, I've been working on lots of different things throughout life. In my younger years, as many of us do, we worked lots of different jobs. So I was working as a plumber. I did some uh, metal machining, like just a support on the side, metal machine shop. I did janitorial work. I did insurance. I did so many different things. But really, I think education it's my career, right? It's my profession. And then I have a lot of hobbies on the side. So lately I've gotten into actually writing, publishing some of the things that I've been doing in life. So I have a self-help book that I put out there and also a fiction memoir of a trip I took into the Himalayas to look for snow leopards.
All right, the background and the walkthrough. I mean, it does sound strangely familiar. I even worked at a gas station after the army. How do you think that varied series of experiences contributed to the desire to want to write? I mean, it had to, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I think that you should live a life, this is at least for me, live a life where the book sort of writes itself. All of us live interesting lives in one way or another, even if we're just doing the 9 to 5 grind and we're just getting by. There are still interesting things that happen, in our lives in the day to day that are worth writing about. Didn't Seinfeld teach us that even nothing is interesting and worth examining? So I think unless you're doing fiction, and creating fantastical worlds, purely creative, imaginative, then I think you can write from your own experience, write from your own life. And so that's sort of my mantra. I have 8 more books to write on my current series of my travels and things I've done in the past. And so it's just going to be writing essentially what I've already done and experienced, and then hopefully continuing to live the adventure forward and write more about those things in future books.
All right. It sort of reminds me of a professor I had. He was I just somehow from the start off of the beaten path. And I think when you start off of the beaten path, there's no deviating from it, right? Once you're out, because there's the concept of there that I picked up in your it's your non it's in your fiction work. I'm sorry, I apologize. The
Yeah, yeah,
concept
it
of
is.
there and chasing the there, it's a wonderful idea. So once you've wandered off the beaten path, it's almost impossible to imagine a life with anything except for that sort of uncertainty and chaos that you talked about in your book.
Absolutely. This concept of there is something that I feel I write about it in the Tales of a Traveling Teacher Walking with Snow Leopards in Paradise, the book about, as we mentioned already, the snow leopard trip. And what I'm talking about in that book is every time I fly, I live internationally. I live in Ethiopia currently, and so I'm constantly traveling to different countries. And when I fly different places and I look out the window, every small village or large city, every place I pass that passes through the window captures my attention. I want so badly to just teleport down into that community and learn what it means to live there, learn the customs, traditions, the difficulties, the victories, all of it. I feel like every single one that I pass, if I don't get a chance to live it and live in that community, I've missed out on something. There's something about the human experience that I've missed. And it almost becomes anxiety inducing, such that I have to like close the curtain to the window because or the shade to the window because it just becomes too much for me to see. I want to be in there. Now I want to be there. Now I want to be there. It becomes too much. And so yes, once you have gone and lived somewhere outside of your own space, not everyone, but I'd say many people, because it speaks to the human spirit, the human desire to learn and explore, to pioneer. I think many people become magnetized to that permanently at that point. And so definitely that was the case for me. My first post was in Kazakhstan, and that is like a playground. That place is amazing. There were afternoons we would just drive out into the open steppe looking for woolly mammoth bones. On Fridays after teaching, I'd go hiking into the Tian Shan Mountains looking for snow leopards, come back on Sunday and get ready to teach on Monday. Before that, my itch to go out and see the there that you're talking about. I think I come from small town America in Washington State. I think the first itch was when I went on this missions trip with my church to Mexico, and, serving communities there best as we could with the limited knowledge we had. I think that was the first time I sort of got out of my very, very small suburbia world and mindset and saw something bigger than myself, and sort of woke up something inside me, that desire to go see something else. There's a motto I use in one of my other books that says, life is beautiful, go see it. And that's sort of been something that was instilled in me from a young person, from my family, and certainly from the religious upbringing I had, is this idea of seeing the beauty in the world around you. And I think that's a choice with so much going on in the world that's very difficult. It can be very negative, and oftentimes our algorithm feeds tend to be just bombarded with negativity. Um, I think it is a choice to then, in spite of that, in spite of the pain, the turmoil in the world, to, to still choose every morning to get up and see the world through a particular lens that chooses to bring something positive, something beautiful into the world. And I think writing is a huge tool for that.
Um, you said something that I express in one of my books, and it's something that after the army, and I saw that maybe because my aha moment, yours was Mexico, my aha moment was Atlanta because it may as well have been another country coming from the small town that I was coming from. And when I saw A Town, I was like, well, okay, the world is a much bigger place. And I met people, I met Jamaicans, I met Nigerians, and I was like, whoa, the world is a much bigger place. And that's where I learned about reggae. And then it was like, well, tell me more. What are the other people listening to? And I traveled so much in the army in a short period of time. I realized that maybe I was limiting possibility up here. And we'll talk about mental processes along this journey. But um, that aha moment led to a sentiment that you almost verbatim expressed. And that's an idea that I expressed in one of my books. And it's simply live the book. Put the book as like your priority. Like you're being lazy if you don't fill these pages today. You're selling yourself short. You're not quite getting there. Because you and I talked offline about the Ross letters, and the Ross letters was kind of like you have a responsibility to do something creative. And that later turned into something of, and I can relate to that idea, believe it or not, of looking down on a plane and wanting to know what goes on in that exact spot. I can absolutely relate to that idea. And I tell you what, it does create this kind of burn and this curiosity, and it doesn't go away. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. The more you see, the more you realize you don't know, the
Yeah.
more you realize you haven't experienced, and the invitation becomes stronger. Amazingly, I have colleagues who I work with in the international teaching scene who have been to 120 plus countries. I've been to measly 40, but and so you could see how even after you've seen 40, some people who've never left their hometown, which is a beautiful thing too, to stay where you're at. People like me who go around and get to see these other places, the only way those places stay intact is because some people decided to stay there. It's sort of this interesting cognitive dissonance with those who love to travel and see the world, is that in order to do that, you have to also simultaneously value people who are the opposite, people who
Oh,
value the opposite.
buddy. Yeah.
Otherwise, there's nothing there to go see and experience, right? So, yeah, the invitation, you look around and everybody else has been so many places too, and you get around like-minded people who are who are constantly learning and growing and seeing humanity in different contexts and places. And it builds your empathy. It helps you appreciate the world more. It helps you see also other dark and difficult things that people face. So it gives you appreciation for the resiliency of humans,
Hmm.
and understanding your own context better. And back to an earlier thing that you were saying about living the sort of live the book too. Um, this is something I talk to my students all about. I say, you're a protagonist in your own story of life, and every day is a new page. And when life gets difficult, while it is hard to do it in that moment to see it as positive, that's exactly if someone was reading the book of you, they're looking forward to that conflict. They're waiting for that conflict to come, because that's when the hero has a chance for her or him to then show themselves, to become a hero, to be chiseled into this person, finding out how strong they can actually be and how resilient they can be in the face of difficulty. So while no one really wants to cheer on difficult times in life, there is a part of that where you say, I invite this because it will test me and see who I am and who I can become. And it's an opportunity in life for sure. But yes, it's the invitation. Once you've had a taste of it, the invitation is continuous at that point. And again, not for every person. It's not always the same for everyone. I have some people that I rub elbows with in the international scene who've gone and traveled and explored things, and they realize, actually home is where I want to be. I want to go back and be settled and rooted. Or there might be seasons in life where that's the case, right? So the books I'm writing right now, the first one, the Snow Leopard book, and then the next 8 are about a season of my life where I was doing extremely adventurous, in some cases, death defying ventures, wildlife work and trekking and this, that, and the other. Whereas now I'm in a season of life as a father where it's a bit more settled, it's a bit more rooted at home until my children are a little bit older and we can go out and venture together. But people go through different seasons as well. So it's a lifelong call, I think, but it might take different flavors.
That is, and you know what? That's a great segue because that sort of walk also creates the possibility for those two different types of literatures, both fiction and nonfiction. You sort of split your path, and you're doing it on both sides. And which came first for you, anyways, when you started your writing journey? Which came first?
Yeah, so it was the nonfiction first because I just needed to get it out. Um, so it's a process I developed over time that began with a very commonplace thing that people think about, and that is, what would your older self say to you today? A common maybe project you might have in class, write to your future self or have your future self write to you. And I found that an interesting concept when I was much younger, but then, like in my teens in college, etc. But then over time, I felt it was insufficient. There was something missing. And so over time, I crafted this process, which is in this book, Inner Voice Revolution, Redesign Self-Talk for Personal Growth and Decision Making. In the book, I detail this process whereby I have future versions of myself talking to each other in my head. It's all a mental projection, right? I call these hologram conversations. And I detail in the book the process and the protocol for it, whereby you get someone from your 80s, speak your own self in your 80s, speaking and arguing, debating with someone from your own 60s and 40s, whatever you are, wherever you are in life, you project it out, right? It doesn't matter the exact date ranges, but different times in your life, you have different priorities and different values. And instead of just imagining what the 80-year-old self wants me to do today, or what that 80-year-old self's reflection is of me, I would rather have different future versions of myself talking to each other and debating with each other, and me being sort of listening in on this conversation. And so that process has been something I've been working on and perfecting across multiple decades. And when I begin to share it with people, friends, family, students, they were saying, wow, I did some version of it at home and it made such a profound impact. Indeed, I could make a good decision after having this sort of weird metacognitive, meditative, reflective process. I felt like I could make a lot better decision. I said, well, okay, yeah, that's the purpose of it. Interesting. It worked for you. And then another person who worked for this person and this person and this person. Eventually I said, this needs to come out of me finally in a formal way, and it needs to be put out there into the world because I think a lot of people could benefit from it. So the reviews from it have come back very strong from people both online and in person and by word of mouth. And so I think it's made a big impact on my life in particular. When I've had big decisions in life, I do this hologram conversation process, and I really gain clarity when I exit this process. And so that's the first one I wanted to write because it's been on my mind for decades. It's been there and it's been part of what's propelled me to go do all the things I want to do in life. And so that was the first one.
And so then the pursuit of the snow leopard came next. When you were composing that one, was that something you need to get out of your system as well? Was that something, because I've noticed that there's a pattern of internal dialogue. So there's that in both of them. So I almost feel like the snow leopard is a metaphor or something. But when you transitioned to nonfiction, was it also what you wanted to say, or did you have a harder time with it?
No, I don't think it was, to answer the last question, I don't think it was any harder because it's not like I'm having to sit down and invent characters, like in typical fiction work. It was sort of, I need to write what I've experienced and what I know. And so it wasn't necessarily a more difficult process. I think the reason why I wrote it first is because it was the last major trip I did just before COVID. It was 2019, December into January 2020. It was the last big thing before everything, locked down. And it was one of the most interesting trips I've ever done in my life. Um, I went at a time of year where it's not typical. People looking for snow leopards are usually going when the mating calls are happening on the ridge lines, and they're a lot easier to find, a little bit warmer, something like February to April. And I went in the dead of winter. And so there was one other tourist that came by for a day or two, but really for 10 days, it was just me and my partner and two guides all alone. And so again, typically when it's the season to see the snow leopard, there's a lot more people there. And so people divide up into different valleys. They have radios. They can, triangulate their searches and much easier to find a snow leopard than when you are your own team and it's bitter cold, like -30, -40 with wind chill colder than that. We're at 5,000 meters or higher. And we ourselves are responsible for pushing into each valley and exploring. And so that was just so strong on my mind this whole time, this last trip. And I think it encapsulated all the adventure I had been doing up to that point before I started having children. And so I wanted to start with that one. And the next few books will be thematically linked to wildlife tracking, as much of my travel in the past has been with wildlife and the work I've done around that. And so I think maybe one or two more books will be centered on wildlife, and then I'll go to other types of travel that I've done. But I think that's why I chose that one, is it was indicative of my adventure, my desire to push myself to the limits. I think it was one of my most exciting trips I've ever taken, and it was the freshest on my mind.
Do you want to explain any more of the nonfiction while we're doing it? Do you want to talk any more about it? Because they're definitely two different books. That's the reason I wanted to ask you about that, is because I'm not saying it's impossible to do that, but it's definitely two different ideas, where one is about focusing your brain and one is a naturalist story, for lack of better words. So I just want to know if one was more challenging than the next. And on top of that, while this is on my mind, were there any influences on either of them that you think shine through in your writing?
Good questions. So I think the nonfiction book, The Inner Voice Revolution, was easier to write just because it's been part and parcel of my life for so long, part of my daily process in life. It just came out quite easily. It was a way of me explaining what it is, defining it, giving a process to it, giving a sample hologram conversation, and then giving a sort of call to action at the end. So I think it just naturally flowed out from my day-to-day living as is. And so I think that one was a bit easier to write. Um, the snow leopard book, what I end up doing is I have a lot of video footage from the trip on my YouTube channel. I have several edited videos and I have a whole like hours of unedited footage as well. So what I did is I rewatched all that footage to get myself back into the mood, into the spirit, into the emotional state of that trip. And so I think that it was a longer process because of that. I think also I did fictionalize several elements of this story. I'm going to be doing that for several of my books because I want to have control of the narrative. Maybe I want to change some facts. There's some things that I've done in my travel where I want to protect the country's reputation because things that maybe weren't so safe in certain trips that I did. Maybe there's some individuals I want to swap out in my stories, etc. So there's a little bit of fictionalizing it. I think I get my inspiration. So the other question you asked me for that, for the books I'll be writing from Big Fish. And now that I have children, I love the movie Big Fish, and I love the idea of a father telling the stories of his life to his children, to his family, but not in the exact detail. That the inner truths and the themes are more important, no matter how exaggerated they may be. And that's always stuck with me, that particular movie and that approach to communicating values to your kids. And so I think all of my books going forward, the memoir ones will be fictionalized to communicate these values to my kids. So I think they're very different because it's sort of who I am as a person too. On the one hand, I micromanage my life. I try to track every single hour, sort of like a student of Brendan Burchard. He's a life coach. He's people like that, or it's just saying, how can I maximize every waking minute of my life? I don't know how many breaths I have left. How can I make them beautiful and powerful? I tell my students all the time, I have more playtime than you, despite all of the different projects I'm working on, because I know exactly how many hours I've allocated to rest, play, family time, etc. And so, because I micromanage every single waking hour, I really am able to take control of my life and do it the way I want to do it on my terms. Of course, life happens and flexibility is necessary. You can have that default schedule and then things happen. Like I just had a third baby recently, and when you're not sleeping at night, the schedule does need to be put on pause for a while. So there's that part of me, but then there's this other creative side of me that likes to dabble in so many creative things. And I get that from my family for sure. So my family's the musicians and the artists, things like this. And so um, I think the managing your life well came just through life experience and seeing what I wanted to do with my life. And then naturally the artistic parts came in over time. These two paintings behind me are actually a couple of my works. So I do fine art painting, I do photography, and doing writing, I do videography. I'm often doing jobs here in Ethiopia around photography or painting. So I actually teach here. I teach literature and language and literature, but then I also teach photography. And it's the photography class I think that most students want to get into because within 5 months, I turn many of my students into, you know, professional is sort of a soft way of saying, or an ambitious way of saying it. But many of the students actually go on to get paying jobs after 5 months of training under me. So we're pretty efficient. We maximize it as fast as we can. So I am interesting in that way. Yes, I have this sort of like maximize efficiency, manage your life, but then creativity at the same time. And I try to merge these two and square the circle somehow.
I think that's we've had that common thread with several writers. I sort of need to account for every moment of my day too, and I I do it with like money as well because of having gone through hard times. I will know the exact amount I'm going to spend by the time I'm at the counter and stuff like that. I think that just comes with the territory of being a person who likes to create. And if you also have that side, it's like there's a side that needs to be serious and a side that needs to be playful, and you're able to express both of those in different forms of literature. And that's why I dabbled in poetry and I dabbled in different styles because right now I'm doing my little art books, but in the future, I would like to talk about serious subject matter, and I would definitely like to be a boon to other people too, and to have them live their book however they see fit, and to just not squander opportunities and things of that nature. So, as far as I want to go back one more time just to touch on naturalism, because you're calling on something that's probably escaped modern consciousness or whatever, and it's kind of sad. It's kind of sad because I got to mess with it in grad school, and you look and you realize, ah, crap, that's not even that old, and we've already sort of lost it from our collective memory. So, do you have any naturalist novels that really stand out as your inspiration? This was the first thing that popped up as a question when I was reading your snow leopard book.
You know, actually, Peter Matheson writes about his experience looking for a snow leopard. I think it's titled The Snow Leopard, something like this. And that is a masterful piece of writing. And I fell in love with that text years ago when I read that. As a literature teacher, there's so many that I'm reading, right? But I would say Washington Irving, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Edgar Allan Poe, these sort of romanticist writers in early America and in England at that time are the ones that I loved the most in late high school, early college. And the way they described the environment they were in, whether they were natural or not, or even if it's just a cityscape, I think they captured my attention. And actually, in my next book, I'm going to try my best to mimic a style that I like to write, which is more in the vein of that kind of writing. In no way do I have the breadth of vocabulary and the silver tongue oration that they do in their writing, but definitely this idea in modern times that the book should be a page turner, it should be, you know, short truncated sentences, et cetera, et cetera. While I did that for the first two books, I think on this next one I'm going to more write in a way experimental. I want to try something more along the lines that I'm passionate about, even if there's a disconnect with what typical readership would enjoy. And maybe I'll tap into something that's of interest, because I think if there's one thing we're finding lately, it's that things that we thought should be archived away for a long time in the human psyche, in the human ethos, are coming back. Let's say something like long form podcasts. You know, Joe Rogan is making this thing popular that we're going for 2, 3 hours, whereas recently we couldn't handle more than 30 characters on X or Twitter. And so this idea that the human appetite's still going to be there for long form podcasting, or for, in my opinion, the kind of writing that was so beautiful at that time, where you kind of get lost in the sentence. The beauty of the sentence itself is a journey with its 8 commas. And so I'm going to try. We'll see. But I would say Peter Matheson's work, and then the early Romanticist writers. Of course, there's so many other writers I love. I love Tim O'Brien. I love J.D. Salinger. There's so many authors I really enjoy. Um, uh, let's see, Nawal Sadawi. There's so many authors that I really, really like. Shiab Nye, the poet. Yeah, there's so many. It's hard to nail it down. You're asking a literature teacher. So
Well,
specifically in terms of naturalism itself, I don't know if there's one that I really emulate.
is it possible that your love of that literature and your need to go see things overlap?
Yes, they absolutely do. Most of my travel throughout my life so far has been either nature based or something weird and out of the ordinary. So if I'm going to a new country, I'll immediately start searching. Now I can use AI as an assistant, but I'm searching for what are the most unique things to do in this country? What are the weirdest things that you can do? So for example, I went to Costa Rica, and a place that has such beauty in terms of its nature. But what I did is went all the way to the south and purchased a treehouse in a treehouse community, way down south near the Panama border. There's no stores around. There's nothing in the area. No gas stations. Just pure nature. You got to hike up to it. It's a beautiful treehouse, the 2-story treehouse, and so even if I'm doing like a relaxing type of vacation, when I'm traveling, I'm going into nature if I can help it. So a lot of it's been around wildlife, like I said earlier, or trekking mountains. Gone so many mountains all around the world: Kilimanjaro, Mount Kenya, Kinabalu in Malaysia, the Himalayas, the Tian Shan Mountains, etc. So yeah, they definitely overlap. Definitely.
There is something I do want to talk to you about because Ellie did suggest we hit it off because we both have a weird sort of story where we're both expats and you're in Ethiopia and I'm in Thailand. I gotta say, for me, it creates kind of a dilemma because now I've just got so much more crap to talk about. And I mean, virtually all the time. Because everything, even after 12 years in this spot, I'm still into it. I'm still into it when I go to an open market. I'm still into it when I see something new. And I almost feel like I got to get the heck out of here and catch up with all of the things I've experienced. I mean, and you have traveled significantly more than I do. Do you ever fear getting backlogged and just never being able to talk about it all?
Yeah, it's that thing where you go back to your home and you realize you've changed, and for better, for worse, and you have stories to tell, but they aren't necessarily stories that resonate with the people in of home. And when I say home, I don't necessarily mean your own actual home, but wherever you call home, the community that you're home, where you launched from initially. And so it's this, you're experiencing culture shock going back home. You are experiencing this overwhelming desire to share with the people you love what you've experienced and what you've gone through, but that's disconnected to their lived experiences. And so it's like handing an orange to a robot in terms of just does it connect? They and then so then you have to rewire your brain and think of what are the things I got to remember what I valued when I was home that are still valuable to the people that are home, and retune into that and listen and appreciate, and sort of like a relearning experience, right? For sure. I think um, one thing I do is I try my best to stay like you're doing there in Thailand, to stay grounded at least where I'm at, instead of constantly only traveling everywhere, at least have a grounding somewhere and experience those things well. So here in Ethiopia, I actually lead tours. I'm a tour guide informally. I just brought 40 plus people to the wild, about an hour and a half outside of Addis Ababa, the capital city. I'll be doing another 40 plus person trip in February. And I think this idea of what does it mean then to stay in one place and stay grounded in one place and understand the value of where you're at? Because there will be overlaps, sort of a Venn diagram. Whatever is valued where you're staying, instead of only hopping around to different places, there'll be some commonalities between that and back home, wherever you come from. And so, whether that's something based around food, music, or faith, something like this. And so, you can share a story that's not necessarily of travel, but of staying. And that can resonate with people when you go back home, if those people aren't also travelers. For some people, home is a place where everybody's traveling, but I think for most that wouldn't be the case. Yeah.
I want to draw that out a little more, if I may, because people may not be able to relate to travel, but they can relate to home. So I like the and I didn't dig in on purpose. This is something that I just came to a point where I wanted to. And through digging in, it becomes a different experience to relate to people as well. I found myself having tremendous difficulty talking to my friends about Thailand, and it almost seemed like I had just been in another state. And I realized that that part isn't relatable. But what was relatable is being pissed off at my job. So instead of writing directly about Thailand, I started writing about my woes in the workplace with just a twist on the locale. Because your concept of there, and again, I've thought about it since I started reading yesterday, your concept of there doesn't always translate to everybody else. And not only that, another thing that you had said about home, bringing something home. Well, you have a new home too. So you're bringing home to home and home to home. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's even further complicated when you have children. This concept of third culture kids, right?
Mm.
And their sense of identity and home. So I married an Ethiopian, and so my children have my own roots, which are mixed of Filipino, Greek, Scottish, and then they have Ethiopian roots and Armenian roots. And so, what is home? They want to go home to America, but they are home here in Ethiopia. It is interesting dynamic when you start mixing it. And then what you said is correct. You have to start getting to the point where you find the transcendent human experiences that are common across any place, and that's how you relate, and that's how you connect with people. And that's as a writer, if you're someone who's writing and you live internationally or you've traveled, instead of only talking about, ooh, this fancy, shiny new thing I've traveled to, it's getting to the human component of it that's transcendent, right? Transnational, etc.
Well, that's what you discovered by digging in too. So you're entering into a phase of it as well, because there's a lot of things I didn't notice until 10 years in. I think about the time I finally swallowed my pride and started wearing flip-flops is about the time that I finally created home and there personally in Thailand, because I swore I would fight it. I swore I'd always own a dryer, and now I'm damn near full native, you know. And it's a different thing. And again, what you were talking about, flying over a place and wondering what it's like to feel settled there. I got to tell you again, I did relate to it, because in some ways I'm actually more settled here than I've ever been anywhere else. And again, instead of the travel part, what about that story about being settled? Now that's something that's relatable across the board, regardless of your level of experience. So I was taking notes as you were going, because you were just hitting so many things. And it's odd how we think alike and get to the conclusion a lot of times just about through the same thought process. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there's just as a wonderful softball question, being an expat has to contribute to that desire to create. It just has to.
Yeah, because you're around multiple cultures and you see creation in different forms. And that's the spark that makes you go, oh wow. Whereas if you're always in one place your whole life, there's so many pros with that. There's so many things where you're connected, plugged into the community. You have a story, a narrative over time of you and your family and how you fit into a community. You have support. There's so many elements that are very pro to that. Um, right. But then I don't know. It's hard to put into words sometimes. Um, yeah, I don't, yeah, I'm lost for words at this part
Well,
actually
it
to answer
creates a
that
need to
question.
create. It creates a need to
Yeah.
create. It makes this infinite loop of, well, I got to express it somehow. I got to tell somebody. I don't even know who it's for at this stage, but I got to tell somebody.
Yeah. So circling back to what I was saying, you're right. You pulled me back to it. It's like the mimicry element, right? So I live in a country here that's never been colonized. So you don't have any sort of destruction or bastardization of what has been Ethiopia since ancient times. And it's one of the unique countries on earth because of that fact. And so you get to see expressions that aren't so common across. Like if you travel to some other countries, I won't name them, but in certain regions, maybe you'll see kind of similar forms of expression and creation across multiple countries. But then you'll come to Ethiopia and it's distinct. It's very much different. And so, right. So it's different places that you go. You're inspired by something fresh and new. But then even the process of creation becomes a question. Do you create from your own roots? Do you create an amalgamation of places you've been? you try to create in a way that mimics the work that you see. So I'm leading a paint and sip night for a bunch of my colleagues here in a couple of weeks. That's food, wine, painting. We give you all your materials, and then we help teach you, and help you mix colors. And if you want the help, but it's just a relaxed, fun time. And when I finally get around to do my own painting for the night, it's like, what do I paint? Do I paint? I come from the Pacific Northwest, and I grew up as a young kid being in the mountains. Do I paint the landscapes of there, or do I paint something that I've seen recently here? And that's always the internal tug of war. Is it the Mescal celebration here? Is it the Timkat celebration here? I want to express through art. Is it something about coffee ceremonies or various tribes here? Or is it the beautiful northwest mountains, like in the North Cascades? Do I want to capture some of that beauty? It's interesting because then from where do you create as well? It becomes the question.
Well, on that note, let's go ahead and close it out with your future plans in terms of the books, because you said you had 8 on tap. Is that correct?
Yeah, so what I did is I bought a bunch of ISBNs as an accountability to myself. So if I'm going to put the money out, fork the money out for these 10 ISBNs, I need to produce. And so I've sort of outlined, mapped out what I'm going to be writing in my future books. So the very next one, which is currently in draft form that I'm writing, is about 3 different wildlife experiences. So it'll be like 3 short vignettes in one book, all of them with interacting with wildlife and all of them deadly. And so one of them I'll give sort of a preview is I've been able to walk with wild lions and do some research with them in various countries. And so that involves like working all night, being up in the daytime, and then I mean like without crossing any ethical lines, getting too close, or putting the animal or myself and my team in danger. We're talking 3 meters away all throughout the night with the lions. And so that will be one of the basis for one of the stories I'll be telling. The other one is wolf research I've done in Belarus in the Nalaboki forest under amazing zoologist there and his wife, who is also a zoologist, Vadim Sidorovich and Irina Rorotenko. I think that's her last name. Oh my goodness, I butchered that. Anyway, these 2 amazing zoologists have done incredible work, and I was able to study under them. So I'll be detailing some of that also. And then I've one other story I'll be adding to the book. So that's the immediate one. And then there'll be one more, or possibly 2 more books after that that are fiction memoir based. My work with the tigers in India and some other stuff in my own home back in America with wildlife. So there's a bunch of that coming up, and then it'll shift to more like very unique travel in Malaysia in being with the Kalabit people and the Palungan people. For example, that's something I really want to write about. My own treehouse in Costa Rica is something I want to write about. Being in Kazakhstan, I want to write about that and things like this. So in Kazakhstan, I found this gentleman in the mountains who is building a castle by hand since 1993. And he eventually became properly famous. He's now passed on. It was sort of this act of personal resilience and resistance because he wasn't issued a passport. He said, fine, I'll go to the mountains and I'll build my own castle by hand. Then I'll be a man of my own castle. And he made a massive, massive castle all by hand from river rock. I think it's probably about a 3 to 4 story castle. It was crazy. It was unbelievable. So those kinds of unique travel experiences that I want to write about, that's what's coming up in the next writing projects. I have so many other projects going on. It's hard to keep up with all of them. Like I said, in different artistic areas. So hopefully I can get to the writing as efficiently as I hope.
Well, I definitely appreciate you joining us. One other thing that we always do, you personally, what would you tell to somebody who's just starting their writing journey? And let's say this person said, "Well, I don't travel. I don't travel. What could I possibly have to say?" What would you say to that kind of person? What would you say to that?
Like we've been alluding to, wherever you go, the human experience is still the human experience. So wherever you're at, I'd say write from what you see and what you experience. Maybe to a new writer is become observant. Maybe it's an art that we've lost lately with the screens in front of us all the time. Um, Maybe go out with a good old fashioned notebook and a pen without coming off too awkward to people around you, and just inconspicuously observe the world around you and see how people behave, and how things go about each and every day, the conflicts, the victories, the things that people experience. Start to document that and take notes on that, and before you know it, you're going to have a whole litany of ideas to work from, even in the most mundane 9 to 5, I have 3 jobs and my life is terrible kind of lifestyle. Even in that, it's rich and full of content. I mean, this is the stuff that resonates with people anyway, whether it's be these sitcoms like The Office. It's just about The Office, but it shows all the complexities of the human experience and interpersonal relationships and such. And so that's what you want to capture as a young writer, is the things that are actually interesting to people. That's the challenge for me, is to not make my stories about the travel itself. As I said earlier, the shiny new thing. It's actually about the underlying human experience underneath it, the value underneath it that I want to pass on to my kids. Because at the end of the day, the actual target audience for my books are my immediate children. If no one reads a book of mine, that's fine. I want my children to know about these experiences. And so it's not just, oh, dad did something interesting. It's about, what did dad learn about this community? What did dad learn about himself? What did he learn about human beings, about struggle, about perseverance, and about adventure, about sort of the fulfilling, meaningful things of life, instead of just chasing happiness, chasing adventure maybe, or difficult things, sort of the underlying message. And so that's what I would tell a new writer. So to condense it all down, become observant, look at the world, the environment that you're in, the community you are in, whatever that may be, and something will definitely make itself obvious to you that's worth writing about, that's inherent in the human experience.
You know, that's actually how I got into it, period, because I never knew what to do. And we've shared each other's work now. I started this thing called the Ross letters, and all it was in the beginning was my observations, because I wanted that accountability. And I was in a small town and there shouldn't have been anything to talk about, but that live the book mentality probed me. Not going to town, go into town, talk to the person in front of you at the grocery line. Just do it. Just do it. And the more you do it, it changes who you are, because now you're sort of living life like an art project. And guess what? It makes the mundane, that word disappears. I created a pretend wife for like 3 years, this thread. I had an imaginary wife in this hometown. I had these imaginary conflicts. I had these real conflicts. And all of these things, all of a sudden, it was like, wait a minute, I'm exploring me. And through doing that, it opened up, wait, maybe I am open to more possibility than I thought it was. Maybe I was a little more open-minded than I thought I was. Then the opportunity to travel abroad came, and it was like, oh my gosh, now when am I ever going to run out of things to write about?
Mm-hmm.
Because finally up here, I have that mentality of living the book, and it'd be just like, what kind of story do you want? I mean, I sort of live to create these stories. So it was really encouraging to talk to somebody who's on paper, we're just about doing the same things. It seems like
Yeah,
on paper. See what I did
it
there?
does. It, it does. There's another line I have in my book that relates to what you're saying, and it says, the lens you choose colors the world you see. And you choose to get up every day to see the world as something worth celebrating, observing, noting, exploring. And if I'm understanding you correctly, and so it's the same for me. You know, I don't need. I'm not someone who drinks coffee. I don't need coffee in the morning. I just wake up ready to go. And some people are looking at me on a Monday morning like, "What's wrong with you?" Like, we're on a planet flying through space. This is insane. We're alive. God only knows how many more minutes and breaths we have. This is unreal. What could we hopefully experience today? And unless I'm actively in a state of torture or in a war zone, I have the blessed benefit of being able to just live, even though trials and difficulties and challenges are going to come, and the illness someday, knock on wood, will come. All of those are part of life's adventure. And if you see it as an adventure, if you choose to put that lens on, life just has a different flavor. I hear a lot of people talk about gratitude as well. You know, if you wake up in the morning and you start from a place of gratitude,
Sure.
it changes how you live. I concur with that. And I would say, for me personally, the flavor of that, or the version of that, is I choose to see the entire world as an opportunity for adventure. And I it's a teacher salary. It's not like I come from any position of financial affluence or anything like this. We were very poor growing up by American standards, and so it's in your own hometown, just like you did. You can find adventure in your own job. You can find adventure. The opportunity is there. It's a choice that people make, or whether or not they see that. Even in the struggle, even in the terminal diagnosis, that is an adventure. It's a terrible one, but it is an adventure in and of itself if you choose to see it that way. You can be an inspiration to other people. You can find opportunity to grow through it. You can have an opportunity to speak life in other people. There's so much to that, so it really is how you want to see the world every day.
Well, you know what? I hope sooner than later some people usher in a way of life that sort of values art again and values travel and values personal reflection and separation. Separation must be very voluntary and it must be a constant action now. And my alibi, my excuse is, I mean, aside from being a dad, which gets me out of everything, but my excuse is, oh gosh, I want to make art instead of looking at the news. I want to make art instead of social media. And I kind of want to make that stuff unhip. I'm trying my damnedest. I lived long enough for punk rock to be cool again. So I really want to pull some people out of that. And again, we're coming from it from different angles, but I swear to you, we got the same message.
I truly hope that, and I believe that this is going to be true, that as AI continues to integrate into our lives and be pervasive, that human spirit, that longing for something that's the genuine article, the human element of it, will take over, and we'll once again have a premium on live theater, on actual art, and not just AI generated content. I wonder if on the back end of this, a decade, 2 decades from now, suddenly we'll circle back with a vengeance towards the things. Yes, we'll still have AI in our lives, but we'll be craving so badly something that is the genuine article, like you're talking about, a separation from the digital life, the digital world, and plugging into something that's truly speaks to the human endeavor.
Joshua Smalley, it has been wonderful talking with you. And you know what? It has been great diving into your work and looking at something definitely unique and unique stories. So, on behalf of Ellie J and Joshua Smalley, my name is Peter McCollum, and this has been another episode of The Indie Side.